Jon Hagen. At the age of 18, which is just a couple of years ago, Jon was hired by Gold Cross Ambulance. Soon he began paramedic training and went on to work 14 years at Gold Cross. He was there when the Appleton Fire Department Paramedic Ambulance Rescue Squad was taken out of service by Mayor Dorothy Johnson and the Appleton City Council. A citizens group, Save Your Fire Departments Paramedics, was formed and did their best to have the paramedic service reinstated. The fate of AFD Squad 91 was ultimately decided in a referendum on April 1, 1986. Jon became a registered nurse and worked in the intensive care unit at Appleton Memorial Hospital. He was then hired as a flight nurse, not a flighty nurse, but a flight nurse at Theda Star. Well, okay. He was at Theda Star and later by Flight for Life. He was a flight nurse for more than 22 years. In 2002, he was awarded a Nightingale Award for excellence in nursing practice from the University of Wisconsin Oshkosh. In 2017, he was recognized as a Star of Life by the Professional Ambulance Association of Wisconsin. Jon's writings have been published in Air Medical Journal and A Legacy of Caring, a book commemorating the first few decades of flight nursing. He also served more than 10 years as a coroner for Allegheny County. In October 2021, his first book, titled Coroner Calls, was published, and he wants me to remind you it's available on Amazon. He continues to document the history of emergency medical services in the area and hopes to have it available online soon. I assume that the history is going to be available, not the actual medical service. He's married and is the father of 2 daughters, has 3 granddaughters. He enjoys photography, traveling, learning about local history, and presenting to this wonderful organization. And he recently became addicted, and I'm not sure if there's a cure for this addiction to pickleball. Please, a warm round of applause for Jon Hagen.
I was at Gold Cross. Do people remember when the Fire Department Rescue Squad was taken off the road in 1985? Okay. Very, very emotional time, and I was at Gold Cross, and I got interested in all this history, and I had scrapbooks full of stuff, and as I look back, there was so much I didn't remember, and looking at it objectively now, it's like, what were they thinking? So this is not going to be a presentation from Gold Cross or whatever. I hope that I am very objective, and I hope you enjoy it. And if it's okay, I'm going to just turn this off for the slide. Whoop. Which one is this here? There we go. Okay, so I want to introduce a few people here first that came. We've got some heroes among us. First of all, Mark Middlestadt, his dad, Bob, was a fireman at AFD, and he told me he used to come and play on the fire trucks at the station. Is Mark in here? Stand up and just wave. And then a man who was very instrumental in the Oshkosh Fire Department EMS, recently retired Chuck Hobley. Chuck, you want to stand up? Well, you're tall enough sitting, you don't need to. And a retired Appleton firefighter, Brad Brodegam. Brad? So I have a little history with Brad Brodegam. When Gold Cross and AFD were doing all this back and forth, a house went up for sale in the Applegate subdivision. My wife and I lived around the corner, and one of the assistant chiefs at AFD was selling his house, and that's Brad's father, Bob. So my wife and I went to see the house, and I said to Bob, I said, I got a confession. I said, I work at Gold Cross. He says, I know. He sold it to us and we lived there for 24 years or something. So thank you for that. And a couple of new people that are in the game. And as, I don't know if you follow the news, but Grand Chute, as of January 1st, 2025, is going to have 2 ambulances and a backup is the last I heard. So that will be gaining momentum in the news. And the Grand Chute chief, Steve Dennison, is here. So Steve, you want to stand up? There you go. And one of the paramedics I flew with at Flight for Life recently got hired at AFD, Ryan Holman, and he's the EMS shift commander. Ryan. So tonight, they will probably be beating cheeks out of here, so you're not asking them questions about if AFD is going to get paramedics and what Grand Chute's plans are and all that. So let's just leave them alone. Their day is coming. And then there's a couple of people here that really this talk is about. The first one has been retired for 35 years. He was an assistant chief at AFD, Mr. Ken Cranchis. Ken is right here in the second row. And 2 of the paramedics, you'll see at the end, a few of them have passed, but 2 of them are here, very instrumental in this whole deal. The first one is Tom Dreyer. And the second one you may have heard of. He, after he was a paramedic at AFD, he went and was the fire chief at Neenah and then at Neenah Menasha, and then he came back and was the chief at Appleton, recently retired, and you helped out at Grand Chute at the end, I think, right? Filled in. Len Vanderweist. So just so you know who some of your friends are. And the pickleball, I kind of hurt my back, so I'm kind of sitting and leaning, so that's what's going on. Okay, so I got a lot of slides. We're going to breeze through them. If you have a question, ask it. And it does get kind of convoluted, and I spent hours on note cards writing it down with dates, and I'm like, what is this? What is that? That doesn't make sense. So at the end, we'll go a little bit slower and try to connect the dots, okay? AFD got an ambulance, a Ford station wagon in 1952 in December, and an officer and a firefighter went and did the ambulance. In the early 70s, Dr. Tom Lesher, and we'll talk about him in a minute, started the EMT program here in Appleton, and they kind of kept on rolling it into the paramedic program. Appleton was the first city outside of Milwaukee and Madison to have paramedics. AFD had paramedics, Gold Cross had paramedics early on, very early on into it, and both services were very well respected. And in 1980, and we're going to talk about Mayor Jim Sutherland, Dorothy Johnson beat Jim Sutherland, and AFD were strong supporters of Dorothy Johnson, which we'll get into. And in 1985, Mayor Johnson kind of turned the tables on the fire department and decided she was going to take a look at getting rid of the rescue squad. And we'll talk about that. And it got ugly. The Post-Crescent said this was the biggest, I don't know how they worded it, I may have it in the slide, the biggest political thing in years around here. The Post-Crescent back then had numerous articles, letter to the editors, ads, support this group, support that group. And if you're looking for something to do, newspapers.com, $75 for 6 months. Oh my God, you can find all these old articles, spend hours. And God loved the Post-Crescent. In those days, they did a heck of a job covering the stories. Okay, and then we're going to talk about, do you remember Charlotte Schmidt? That maybe is a name that'll come up. Okay, let's see if we go. So this is Squad 9-1. That was the paramedic unit. This was purchased in 1979 from Pierce for $35,000. Steve, I'm sure that's probably the figures you're getting for a new ambulance today, right? Right in there. But that was it, and when the rescue squad went away, it became the police department, I think SWAT unit, something with the police department, but that was it. It was Pierce. At the time, well, I don't know at this time, but for a while, people didn't want to buy from Pierce because their equipment is more expensive, and they were looking at saving money, even though people from here worked at Pierce. All right, he said, there we go. So we're going to do a little bit of history, and then we're going to get, this is the salad bar, okay? In 1900, Appleton Police bought a patrol wagon that they used as an ambulance. So back then, it was probably people, you know, falling off a horse and hauling them to the hospital and all that. And it said the police department ran it because to cripple the fire department and provide inadequate patrol and ambulance service would be the case. Firemen to undertake the duties would be most unwise. So it's all right as it stands, so the police did it. And the last reference I can find in the Post-Crescent was 1922, where the police department transported a patient. And tonight I met Mrs. Salm, who's transcribing old police record books, and she has it to 1921 as far as she's gotten. So that seems to be a pretty fair number. And then there's Kunitz Ambulance, and that was located right where the library is now. Right around the corner from where the fire station was, they had a livery service. J.C. Kunitz came from Germany. He was affiliated with Otto von Bismarck, and he was known to have huge black Percheron horses. So they got an ambulance, and it said the patrol wagon, the springs are too stiff, the rig is too high, and there's no covering. So he upgraded right away. And in 1903, that's their ambulance, and that photo is taken looking to the east, probably right down Washington Street. So that's all right in the area now of the library. There's at the Outagamie County Museum, there's a big red painting of the fire department, police department, and if you look in the background, Kunitz is in there. Okay. And then Oscar got a fancy ambulance. I was pretty impressed with that. And the other picture is from 1937. And it looks like a big station wagon, really, but that was the ambulance. Appleton had a little bit of funeral home ambulances from what I can find, but not much. Most towns, the funeral home provided the ambulance service because they had a vehicle that the patient could lie down in, and if things didn't turn out so well, maybe they would get another ride. So the Beyer Funeral Home, Oneida and Franklin Street, and that became the Kahn Funeral Home, and then Wickman's bought it in 1929, and the ambulance was discontinued then. Valley Funeral Home had it for about 2 years, and their paperwork says that their board of directors said that they did not think the funeral home should be in the ambulance business, so they got rid of it. And then Ellenbecker and Brown up on Appleton Street, they had it again for a couple of years. I don't know if they just weren't making money or why they didn't stick it out. Okay, and then in 1950, Oscar Kunitz was a private pilot, and he was in a plane crash. He was flying back from somewhere down south. They crashed near Janesville, Eagles Convention in Beloit. And I met with Oscar's, she's married to Oscar's grandson this week. I met her. And so Oscar crashed, died. Oscar was quite a character. He was a bowler, he was a swimmer, he rode his bicycle across Europe. So if you get newspapers.com and you type in Oscar Kunitz, you're gonna get all sorts of stuff. But Oscar had a daughter, 1950, named Helen, and Helen was a pilot as well. And Helen seemed like quite a woman, that she did a lot of stuff. But anyway, in 1951, Helen sold the ambulance to Harold Linsmeyer, and it became Lindy's Ambulance. Ring any bells with anybody? Quite a while ago. And in 1967, Jim Welch bought Lindy's, and in 1968, Welch changed the name to Gold Cross, which is still the Gold Cross today. And Jim Welch died last fall, and I worked for him for 14 years, and I stayed in touch with him, and I asked him, I said, what was the ambulance before Lindy's? And he had no idea. So I went to the library, and I found the article in 1951 where Helen had sold it. So now we get into another ambulance controversy. In 1990, Welch wanted to retire. So he sold the ambulance to Novus. Theda Clark and Appleton Memorial, Appleton Medical Center, interchangeable now. He sold it to Novus. St. E's got upset that they were worried they were going to lose patients, that Gold Cross was going to be directed to go to AMC or to Theda Clark. So St. E's threw up a big stink, and they brought in Metro Ambulance from Green Bay, and we were going to have 2 ambulances again. And Theda Care, Theda Clark, AMC, Novus could not understand why St. E's didn't want to buy 45% of the ambulance. It's like, well, we own the darn thing, but you can help fund almost half of it. So finally, in 1991, they agreed, and as of today, Mercy, St. E's, Theda Clark, Theda Care, and who am I missing? AMC. Yeah, AMC, Theda Clark, they all own a quarter of it today yet. So that's the evolution. And Gold Cross does about 25,000 calls a year. That includes emergency, non-emergency, everything. So at 3 in the morning, if you need to go to Madison or Milwaukee and you're not in a helicopter, you're probably in Gold Cross. They cover big parts of 3 counties, 4 counties now, they're in Wapaka. They have a population of about 280,000 people, 1,200 square miles. And one thing that is very, very important that Gold Cross has done through a thing called Heart Start, which is a golf outing, they have bought and placed about 600 automatic external defibrillators throughout the valley. So if you're at Spats sometime, you'll see they have a sign, they have an AED. So their saying is they want to make them as common as fire extinguishers. That's probably a reach, but right now, if somebody goes down, the quicker that somebody can start CPR and defibrillate you, the chances of you surviving, and especially with an intact brain, are much higher. So that is something that they should be acknowledged for, is having that. But what bothers me, I worked at Gold Cross from 1977 to 1991. I started at $3.25 an hour, get puked on as many times as you can in that 24-hour shift, and their ambulance serving you since 1991. I guess I didn't count for any of that. So that's when the 4 hospitals bought it. But that every time I see that, it kind of... And then there's Larry's ambulance. And I'm not looking to make any enemies. I'm just kind of telling you the way it is. Larry started in 1956. He was kind of a showman. I was told, I've met Larry. Larry is now deceased. He would show up. He was the guy who would show up with a bag of pens or a box of donuts, drive fast to get you to the hospital, and he'll send you a flowery bill, special care just for you, and if you pay by next Monday, we'll take $6 off the bill. Stuff like that. But Larry, in 1964, he claimed that the 58th baby was born in his ambulance. So in, 8 years, they had 58 babies in his ambulance? Appleton Memorial probably didn't have that many babies in that time period. And then in the late 60s, okay, they're starting to talk about ambulance ordinances. There were rumors, I don't know. Supposedly, Larry had a bartender who would drive for him. Not saying the guy was drinking, but he would be at the bar, the phone would ring, and the guy would have to go. There were some shoving matches at calls with Larry's and Gold Cross and all that. So Larry, I think, was a good businessman, but he didn't want all the training. He wanted to get you to the hospital and go for the next one. Okay, so that was kind of his downfall. Larry's son, Jeff, runs Larry's livery service, who does a lot of work for local funeral homes, coroner's office, stuff like that. Jeff is you're not gonna find a nicer guy than Jeff, and now his son is getting involved in it. So for transporting bodies, that's still Larry's livery service. Okay, so let's get into the fire department. 1952, December, they were trained in first aid. At the same time, Larry's and Lindy's were getting a subsidy from the city, $2,000, $4,000 a year each. And the records aren't real clear, but it looks like if the fire department went on a call, somebody would still call Larry's or Lindy's, and they would almost always transport you in the private ambulance. I can't find that word for word, but that's the way it looks. They pulled the kid out of the Fox River. Dr. French went and gave him intracardiac epinephrine. The kid got resuscitated, and the private ambulance took him to the hospital. And it's like, well, why wouldn't the fire department? But that's just the way that it is. And in 1967, they told the fire department ambulance they have to stay in the city limits. The Appleton taxpayers are paying for it, so it's got to stay in town, which to me makes sense. And they also have to start charging, because the private services were charging $16 to $18 a call, so they enforced it that the fire department had to do it. Without that, it may still be free. 1969, the fire chief, how do you say his name? Kennel? He told the city council that AFD should have the ambulance and that the city should help the private operators whenever possible to keep them in business. So it looks like they're playing fair. They're not trying to shove anybody out of the way. Here's the calls. We called them rescue runs. It was a rescue squad. So you can see in 1952 it started. The first record I could find, 25 calls, 64, 281, 1974, approaching 500. So more than a call a day. Things are going along pretty well. In 1972, the city decided they're going to do dual response. So the fire department, if they're dispatched for a car accident at College in Oneida, the fire department goes, and 1 month Gold Cross goes, and 1 month Larry's go. Again, primarily for transporting the patient, okay? And then so let's see, what's the month? May. So let's say Gold Cross is covering the city, then Larry's would be covering the county. So if you have an accident out in Dale, Larry's would be coming to get you. The next month, Gold Cross is in the county, Larry's is in the city. So you have an accident in Dale, Gold Cross will get you, but Larry's will show up anyway and try to take the patient. But that's just how it worked. 1972, emergency comes on. Everybody goes nuts, including me. That's what got me interested in this whole deal. Chuck Obley's going to go home, make a big bowl of popcorn, and watch Emergency till 4 a.m., right? Yeah. So emergency comes on. Johnny and Roy, the paramedics from Squad 51 at the Los Angeles Fire Department. And this is for EMS people. Now, if they don't know who Johnny and Roy are, you're getting old, right? I mean, we used to have caps on the drugs and we'd pop them because they did it on TV. Everybody would do that. So in 1973, Dr. Lesher starts the EMT course at St. E's. The state tells Lesher, we can't do another one for 3 or 4 years. So Lesher says, baloney. He says, I'm going to start another one. And the state says, well, you can't take the state test. So Lesher says, that's fine. There's a national test they can take. So that's how he circumvented it. But then he's got these guys trained as EMTs. They're young and eager. Tom Dreyer, you want to be a paramedic? Yep. So we're going to roll you right in to the paramedic course soon thereafter. They used local physicians, so Dr. John Milkey taught cardiology, Appleton OBGYN physicians would teach childbirth, the surgeons would teach trauma, the anesthesiologists would teach intubation. So the city, the community really bought into it because they knew who these people were, and so it wasn't cookie cutter. A couple people I'm going to mention, Dr. Lesher, he passed away a few years ago. He was a family practice physician in Appleton, got interested in emergency room work, and he would go to the ER at night because you broke your arm, and there's his partner treating some kid who fell out of a tree, and his other partner is sewing up some lady who cut her hand. And he's like, this is crazy. Why are we all here? So he got the docs to agree, and they started covering the ER one doc at a time on nights and weekends. So tonight, I'll be on call. Tomorrow night, you'll be on call. Everybody else is asleep. You're like, holy smokes, that kind of worked. Well, then soon after, he decided he was going to make it 24 hours, full-time, 24/7, 365. So he got the physicians. He started a group called CES, Community Emergency Services, and I think it has dissolved now. But then in 1976, he went to Mercy and did the same thing there and got paramedics trained at Mercy. So Tom Lesher was a huge, probably the one most important guy in this whole mix. Dr. Mark Moore was a doctor in Vietnam. Lesher went to a conference. He put it wasn't a Post-it note, but he put a note on a bulletin board, hey, we need a doctor in Appleton. Moore comes and talks to him. Moore comes, and with his experience in the war, was just a huge benefit for training the paramedics here. And Dr. Lesher's gone. Dr. Moore is in his 80s. He was hoping to come tonight, but he messaged me that he wasn't able to make it. And then Jim Welch at Gold Cross. Welch got a lot of bad publicity during the fire department thing. He did do a lot to promote the paramedic thing. He was always up to spend money for the next training and stuff like that. And then Bob Sternhagen taught EMTs and paramedics. He was handpicked by Lesher, and he's got a whole generation of people that he trained. Bob is gone now too. Okay, 1974, the dual response. We're back to that. Fire department says, you know what, we're okay giving a patient to Gold Cross, but Larry's is scaring us. Because people aren't trained, they whatever, and they did not want to give patients over to Larry's. They were fine with Gold Cross. And Larry starts, and this is all in the newspapers, why did they want to spend 30 minutes at a scene playing doctor? So you've got a guy in cardiac arrest, or you're digging him out of a car. Larry wants to throw him in the ambulance and go. And the thinking at the time was, nope, we're going to treat him at the scene, stabilize him. Do we live in Russia? This is terrible. Just because the fancy EMT word comes along, I'm shut out. People are going to die in the street because of that fancy EMT word. Not the thinking at the time. Okay, 1976, there's a study of the Appleton Fire Department Paramedic Squad. They had one ambulance at Fire Station 1 on Drew Street. Okay, they ran with 3 paramedics. And the study from Washington, D.C. says they should expand it by adding a second ambulance and crew, keep it at St. E's, and then that way the nurses and physicians at St. E's can work with these paramedics, teach them stuff, make them stronger, more patient contact and stuff like that. And that just kind of got swept under the table. And the fire department, it says the EMS and its relationship with the private services has never been established, so it's still kind of just out there in the wind. And here's Larry's one of his old ambulances, and he's tired of having stuff stuffed down his throat. Aldermen were fighting to extend deadlines for him, and he didn't want to do it, didn't want to spend the money, so he went out of business in '78. This is probably and again, I've met Jim Sutherland. He has passed away. Dorothy Johnson's passed away. I have no axe to grind with anybody, so if it comes across that way, that's not my intent. But this is probably what did Jim Sutherland in, at least as far as EMS. he decided he's going to split the city in half. And this is Oneida Street, Wisconsin, Richmond Memorial Drive across the bridge, and then I think it went back to Oneida Street. And Gold Cross only would go to the calls on the west side. So Linwood Park, you get burned, you fall over, hit your head, get hit with a baseball, you get Gold Cross, even though you're in the city. If you're at Lions Park or at Lawrence University, you're going to get both Gold Cross and AFD, the rescue squad. And AFD is like, what is going on here? Why is that? They were not happy about it, and that got ugly. And the firefighters took out a newspaper. I started in '77, and this was a hot topic at the time. AFD was not happy about it. I was young and dumb thinking, well, it's okay if they don't show up half the time. It's more calls for us. So I was told that the fire department union strongly supported Dorothy Johnson, and she beat Sutherland, Appleton's first and only female mayor. I think she served 3 terms. She beat Sutherland 56% of the vote, and Johnson said that Sutherland ignored the petition about splitting the city, and that's what hurt him. 1980, in May, okay, we're starting to get there. The aldermen said, you know what, let's just send Gold Cross, let's send the fire department, and everybody was happy, or pretty happy then. They got rid of the splitting the city. 911, which started, I think, that same year, sends the closest ambulance. So if it's across the street from if it's at Druin College, they send the fire department, they let Gold Cross know, and Gold Cross will go get there. Gold Cross will transport unless, so what this is getting to be now is if AFD would transport, it would be because Gold Cross wasn't available. They might have been busy, they're covering the county and all that happened. Or, so they're paramedics now. So you have chest pain, they put the heart monitor on, they start an IV, they give you some oxygen, maybe give you some cardiac meds, maybe have to defibrillate you and all that. So if AFD put their heart monitor on, that was the criteria that they would transport. Okay, that basically are the 2 criterias. And that really worked pretty well. I mean, Fred Seelig, and again, we're trying to discourage the use of the rescue squad. The zone system's gone, things are getting better. And again, AFD is not trying to shove anybody out of the door, they're just trying to play fair. Okay, so this is now, paramedics are going, so you can see the calls and the transports and the percentage of the calls. So they, in 1975, they went on 765, they transported 28% of the time. Okay, pretty fair. You know, 18, 19% here, a couple years they didn't have numbers for. So in 1985 is when Mayor Johnson took them off the road. They didn't have statistics for that year, but in '84, they went on 1,358 calls. So that's 4 a day, pretty much, right? So, you know, fairly busy. And again, in the year where we have numbers, they're only transporting 19% of the time. So it's not, they're getting their share, but are they taking a lot of money from Gold Cross? I don't know. 1976, they transported 258. The average call for a cardiac, and this was all in a newspaper, every time Gold Cross would raise their rates, it'd be a lot of ink, $100. So the fire department, if you will, is taking $25,000 that Gold Cross isn't going to get because they transported, okay? And then in '83, it was $215, and Gold Cross lost $51,000 using this graphic. Welch said in '84, the paramedics, his paramedics made $20,000. I was making $6.85 that year. I don't know what I made that year. I tended to work a lot of overtime. Okay, so here we go. '85. Now things are going to get interesting and maybe confusing. So I'll try to be clear. Dorothy appoints a task force. It started out with 9 members. They're going to study the ambulance issue in Gold Cross. Jim Welch, I was a supervisor at Gold Cross. Jim Welch told me, Welch is dead and he can't defend himself, I have no reason to lie. He told me that Mayor Johnson knew who was gonna vote which way. She wanted the fire department gone, so she's gonna pick 1, 2, 3, 5, you're on my side. 1, 2, 3, okay, you guys are fire department, okay. Again, I don't know if it's true, but okay. And then, and this is where the post-crescent gets to be a lot of fun. These are the figures, how much does it cost to have the fire department ambulance, one ambulance? $330,000, the fire department says. The task force says almost close to double that, $544,000. The Appleton personnel director, he's in the middle, who should probably know better than anybody. And the chairman, Robert Miller, who also just recently died, he said in the meeting, he says, I'm so confused, I don't know what's right anymore. So this is going on. 2 of the votes for the fire department happen to be Lawrence University economics professors. One of them was a PhD, Marty Finkler and Jules LaRock. Mr. Finkler is still alive, Mr. LaRock passed away. They said in an opinion column in the newspaper that it was increasingly clear that the issue before it was cost. Okay? That was Mayor Johnson's big thing, is she wanted to save some money. And they said, PhD, that if AFD was the sole provider of EMS in the city, the cost would only be an additional $50,000 compared to $344,000 or $544,000. And they also said the mayor, who appointed the blue ribbon panel, handpicked, under the guise of objectivity, made her feelings about elimination of the squad well known, while the task force members agreed they weren't going to discuss it publicly, until this came out in May of '85. May of '85, the fire department was already off the road. Okay? I had coffee with Mr. Finkler a while back. He's an interesting man. This is what Mayor Johnson said in the paper, that she was officially, she's opposed to it. It's imprudent to increase government finance program. The government cannot be all things to all people. Okay? So what really happened? I think it was more than money, taxpayer expense. Duplication of service, we heard a lot that, oh, Gold Cross has got paramedics, so why does the fire department need them? And then public versus private. Gold Cross is private, trying to make a buck. Why is the city doing it and charging for it and all that? Well, they probably wouldn't have charged for it if they didn't have to. And then this charter ordinance is going to become key. Okay? St. E's, February of '86. Fire department's off the road in April of '85, but the referendum hasn't happened yet. St. E's comes out with an article, and these are their big things: regionalization, medical control, and flexibility. Okay, so the regionalization basically was AFD was not supposed to leave the city. And this is kind of a metroplex. You can drive from Green Bay to Oshkosh and not know you've left town, kinda. So if you're in Kimberly, you can call, or Gold Cross can go and take you to Theda Clark, and AFD's got to stay within the walls of the city. That was the basic idea of it, is that Gold Cross can go all over and AFD can't. And then medical control, in those days, the doctor at St. Elizabeth's, Dr. Lesher and Dr. Moore were in charge of the paramedics, but if it's 3 in the morning and Dr. Knock is on, Dr. Knock is who you're getting your orders from, okay? The charter ordinance would have given that control to the fire department, and I don't really understand how that all would have worked. And again, I think it's a little bit of a reach on St. E's part, but it's a long time ago. And then flexibility with they claimed that, oh, Gold Cross, if we want to do something different, we can do it, and the fire department's going to be too regimented, and they won't. Again, smoke and mirrors, maybe, I don't know. So on May 2nd of 85, this task force decides that by 5 to 2, now I said there were 9 people, so I don't know what happened to the other 2, but they said that the service should be provided by Gold Cross. May 2nd. Mayor Johnson says, I'd like to get this thing over with so we can go on to other things. And the fire department now, you thought they were mad before, now they're mad. Understandably so. They began a leaflet campaign to support the paramedics. So here we're on May 15th. So if we go back, one more. May 2nd, May 15th, there's a council meeting. 175 people go. Post-Crescent, here it is, hottest political issue that has surfaced in the city in years. There's more than 7,000 residents that they demand that an ordinance be created that the 911 calls go to the city rescue squad. The aldermen say nope, and they vote 12-7 to discontinue the rescue squad. I was not at the meeting, very heated meeting, excellent coverage by the Post-Crescent. So you can see this is really gaining momentum now. And on May 20th of 85, 5 days later, at 4:54 in the morning, the rescue squad made their last call. Arlen Johnson, he's passed away. Donnie Patricus is gone. Whoops, I'm sorry. And Pete Rasmussen is still alive. They did the last call. 7 o'clock in the morning, Tom Dreyer was there. They came and drove the ambulance out, and that was it. So back then, they had one staffed ambulance. You saw it, that nice Pierce ambulance. They ran with 3 paramedics. Gold Cross, 99% of the time, ran with 2. So why do you need 3? Well, you got an extra person, but if you have a cardiac arrest patient and you have 2 people in the back to do CPR and all this other stuff, drive. They had, at the time, 11 paramedics on staff. So if they would have done that second ambulance, they had half of their second crew if they would have went with 2 paramedics on a call. And just think, you've got all these firefighters that could help out, drive and all that. It's like, I don't know. And okay, I told you they responded to 1,350 calls and they transported that many. So I don't think it was a great decision. Charlotte Schmidt was a woman who lived somewhere near Fire Station 1. She had 2 diabetic children. They were sick, they were brittle. So Charlotte Schmidt used 911 a lot, and the fire department almost always got there first because Charlotte lived near them. Charlotte was a huge admirer of the fire department because of their service, and she thought they were getting screwed. So she took the bull by the horns, and they started this group, Save Our Fire Department Paramedics, and they hired James Hill, as their attorney. He had an office in the Zilke building. So in May of 85, they got all these signatures asking, the referendum asking that the fire department be reinstated. Like, this is not right. We got all these people signing it. And Judge Dennis Lubke said, no, the referendum cannot overturn the city ordinance. Okay? During this time, one of the AFD paramedics, who is now not on the ambulance, got a ticket by APD for refusing to yield to a Gold Cross ambulance. Name will be not mentioned because he went on to have a great career, and I know. This group allegedly threatened Mayor Johnson and 6 alderpersons who wouldn't be up for re-election till the next year. And the 8 other aldermen who don't support the fire department, they were after them. And Charlotte Schmidt said they would get these 8 next April in the polls. I mean, they were mad. They wanted to get these aldermen out of there, get some aldermen in there that would see it their way. So they went and got 16,000 signatures supporting the paramedic unit. And one of the supporters said, that's more than Mayor Johnson had in the last election. what they did was they did it as a charter ordinance. The charter ordinance was like binding. He can't throw it out because if it passes, it's like written in stone. So that was the kicker why the second petition, it had nothing to do with twice as many signatures, it had to do with the charter ordinance. And they wanted to establish the Emergency Rescue Division, and all 911 calls would go just to the fire department. So AFD is saying, you know what, now we're drawing a line in the sand, we'll take it. But in the ordinance, it said they could call a private service to transport. So they probably may have very well continued to use Gold Cross or whoever to transport, but they wanted to have their say in it. And they had, they've been through a lot. City Attorney David Geenan called all this Tuesday's hash with Wednesday's gravy. He's like, they're not going to win, nothing to worry about. And Lupke said that, yeah, the charter ordinance vote we have to do. Mayor Johnson said it's encroaching on public policy. And so Lupke says we're going to have a citywide referendum on April 1st, 86. Now it gets screwy. So take a deep breath and try to follow along. There's not a quiz, but I sat doing with index cards. So the aldermen now decide they're not going to fight it. They say, you know what, put it on the referendum, let the taxpayers decide. We're sick of getting threatened, we're sick of all the bad press, we're sick of all the emotion in town. And the Post-Crescent said it really had boiled down now to a right to vote. It's that, you're trying to ram this down their throat, let them vote, let them decide it. And then Geenan decides that he's going to fight it yet. I don't know. And then in January of 86, the fire department went as first responders. So you call 911, they dispatch the ambulance, they dispatch a fire engine with trained medical people on to help provide first aid till the ambulance gets there and to help afterwards. Things were getting a little dicey, so Dr. Bowers from St. E's complained to the mayor, and APD took over that duties in January of 86. So then we start, and I've got some samples on the back table there about pamphlets and yard signs and advertisements in the paper, letters to the editor. Here's St. E's political ad. If you want to read it, I have it on the back table. Here's the regionalization. We talked about that. Okay, March 12th, 86, 3 judges in Wausau said, yes, it's on the ballot. So nobody can argue about it anymore. Here's the charter ordinance. I have a couple copies on the back. If you want to read it, you're welcome to. But basically that was it, is that the fire department would have the ambulance, they would get all the calls, and they could decide if they wanted to call private to transport them. Okay, we talked about this, and again, Mayor Johnson was not happy about it. Okay, 1 ambulance, 1 rescue unit. So, I worked on April 1st, 1986 at Gold Cross, and I was 110% certain that we were going to get smoked in this election. And I got up the next morning, and it's all over, WHBY and stuff, that the fire department lost, and I could not believe it. So here's, I don't know if you're in the city, what wards you're in and stuff like that. There's Charlotte Schmidt, and I felt bad for Charlotte Schmidt. So why did they lose? Did the charter ordinance scare people off? Like it's going to be written in stone, we can't change it? Was it voter apathy? Did all those 16,000 people not show up thinking, oh, we got it in the bag? And in that election, there really was not much else meaty in the election. It wasn't a governor, it wasn't a mayor, wasn't a president. It's kind of 7 aldermen, county sales tax, county supervisors. So it wasn't like November's gonna be, you know what I mean? And maybe the no voters were just the silent majority all along. Charlotte Schmidt, I don't mean to laugh, she was 0 for 3 that night. She lost the fire department vote. She lost in her election against Dr. Robert Swanson as a city alderman, and she was running for a county supervisor, and she lost that as well. Charlotte Schmidt donated, so after the election, she was in the paper and on TV a lot. People knew who Charlotte Schmidt was, and she was a waitress. She had no medical training or any of that. I told you why, her reasons for supporting the fire department. She donated one of her kidneys to her son, and then years later the son died. But Bill Knutson did an article, and Charlotte said, well, I guess my bikini days are over. So she was kind of a good sport about it. And the last I knew, I talked to her maybe a year ago. She was living up in Wapaka, and she's in her 80s and was doing well. But she did a lot with that citizen support group. Okay, now some interesting sidebars. In March of '85, Fred Seelig retires, Appleton's fire chief. Kind of a fire and brimstone guy. You knew he was in the room, right? He was, you know. And in May, the rescue squad makes its last run, and in September, they hire a new chief, Rich Davis, from Oregon. So you're in this big period of turmoil, and you've got months here without a chief. Then in March, before the election, Davis goes in the paper and says, it's not a paramedic issue, it's a duplication of ambulance service in the city. People should vote their conscience. I can manage with or without it. I was told by several firefighters that they really resented Chief Davis for not taking the bull by the horns and standing up for his crew. And I heard that this plagued him throughout his career at AFD, that they couldn't let this go. You know, the fire department, the firefighters are, how do you say, a very strong, proud group, and to have your leader not stand up and you know, charge the hill. So anyway, that happened, and then on April 6th is the vote, and they lose. Okay, so I think losing the fire chief at that time, and you know, that long without a chief and all that, played a big role. And then later, after the election, Davis, in the paper, said he did not have to cut a deal with the mayor or the police and fire commission like, well, Rich, if we give you the job, you're gonna just shut up about the paramedics. He said that didn't happen. I talked to a guy, Gene Reese, a couple weeks ago, and Reese is not buying that at all. But again, I don't know. And then Davis marries an alder person, Sue Steffens from the 7th Ward. She was a big supporter of eliminating the rescue squad. So that's kind of interesting. And then in July, they're out in Nebraska. They have an accident. Sue Davis is critically injured in a car accident. She was in a coma, very, very seriously hurt. Anyway, she survived. They got divorced. In August of '97, Davis went to a job in Arkansas, and he was only chief there for 2 years or less. And I Googled him, he's retired and still in Arkansas. So again, if they would have had a strong chief at that point, who knows what would have happened. And then Jim Hill. Do you know Jim Hill?
I remember him.
Is he, anybody know Jim Hill, the attorney, and if he's still alive or not? So Jim Hill was with Charlotte Schmidt and the group. He was in the paper a lot, and Jim Hill is the guy who got credit for coming up with the charter ordinance. A great thing to pull out, because that almost won in the election. So one of the paramedics from AFD, Jim Bruckner, and I've talked to Jim about this, he got mad because Saney's doctor said The fire department's good, but we think Gold Cross is a little bit better. It was in the paper, and the firefighters, the paramedics, AFD were hurt by that, rightfully so. So Bruckner filed a lawsuit against Dr. Bowers and Dr. Knock and Mayor Johnson, saying they made false, misleading, and defamatory comments about the fire department paramedics. Totally understandable. Jim Hill is the attorney. AFD gives him a $1,000 retainer fee to file the lawsuit. Bruckner's calling Hill saying, when is this going to court? What's going on? Hill's, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. Well, Hill withdrew the lawsuit without telling Bruckner and kept the money. And there are speculation as to what he was doing with a lot of money that's not legal. We'll leave it at that. Hill voluntarily surrenders his license, and in January of '89, he's facing 34 years in prison and a fine of $50,000. He embezzled money from his clients, including $116,000 from his late father-in-law. They had a lien on the property, and they were worried that the government was going to get it. So Hill says, well, just give me the money and we'll take care of it. Well, guess what? It's gone. So, and that's why I don't know. And so anyway, he ended up getting 12 years. And Dorothy Johnson said it's strange that the man who instigated the charter ordinance has been disbarred and now went to prison. So anyway, that's kind of the convoluted story of it. I've got so much information on this stuff that I should write it all down and sell it to you for $5 a copy. These are the 13 men who were Appleton Fire Department paramedics. Ron Scheid, he was a captain, and he was kind of the early leader, I think, for a while, wasn't he? Rowley, he's passed away. Bob Stager has passed away. Arlen Johnson has passed away. Dick Graffis has passed away. Gary Ale has passed away. Don Patricus has passed away. And Mike Harris has passed away. We have Tom Dreyer here, Bill Markwart, Lenny Vanderweis, Pete Rasmussen, Scott Rayrauer, Mike Wiedert, and Jim Bruckner. So where do we stand today? Oh, I'm going to tell you one story. So in the time that they took the fire department off the road and the election, Gold Cross is the sole response. So we're going, and the firefighters are there, and let's just say some of them were nicer than others. You know, there might be a comment here, there, whatever. Most of them were pretty good, and I tried to be pretty good back, so, you know, but there were hard feelings, and I understood it. So one night, we get called. Gold Cross's station was on Richmond Street up by the Dairy Queen, and we get called down by the VFW, straight down for a cardiac arrest at a fire. And I am thinking, shoot, this is going to be a firefighter, and this is not going to go well. If I can go there and defibrillate him and walk him to the hospital and get my picture with him in the paper, something's going to be wrong. And I am like, oh my God, no. A fireman went down at the scene, and I'm thinking, why am I working here tonight? And we get there, and it was Michelle Coy. Remember her? She was a woman that somebody broke into her apartment, surprised her, and the guy stabbed her like, I don't know, 70 or 80 times, and it was dark. The firefighters had brought her down the stairs. She was in an upstairs apartment, and they were doing CPR on her in the dark. They couldn't see, so we just threw her in the ambulance and headed to St. E's, and then we saw all her injuries. And that case was huge for a long time because they thought she was a police department informant and blah, blah, blah. And then it was just a guy who lived across the street looking to rob somebody. He didn't mean to rob her. He was trying to rob her place. But anyway, I was so glad that it wasn't a firefighter because it just wouldn't have been cute. Anyway, Appleton and La Crosse are the top two of the top 28 most populated cities in Wisconsin who don't have a fire department ambulance. Neenah is number 29, and that has been covered by Gold Cross since 1977. So these are the approximate populations. Appleton is covered by Gold Cross. The fire department provides first responder care. They do have some paramedics on the engines. There is rumors, speculations that they may be interested in getting an ambulance back. That's a talk for another time. But anyway, and then La Crosse, they have Tri-State Ambulance, and their paramedics will work with Tri-State Ambulance on a scene and transport with them, but they don't physically have the ambulance. And so when AFD had their paramedics, they had 3 paramedics on a call. And today with the budgets and everything, they probably would have 2, and they would utilize firefighters as first responders to help them transport when they needed to. You know, if it's a broken ankle, fine, go with 2, but if it's a cardiac or a woman having a baby or whatever, oh no, Larry's did the baby, but anyway, Gold Cross got a waiver in 2019. They can run now with only 1 paramedic on board. Paramedics are getting hard to find, and most paramedics would prefer to work with a fire department where the wages typically are better, the benefits typically are better. So enough said. So Gold Cross, they may have 2, but it's okay if they have 1, and that's why having paramedics on the engines to help them, because I did this type of stuff for a long time, and I tell you, you really rely on your partner when you get something weird that you're like, whoa, what's this? And then, you know, they'll say, well, how about this? And it's like, yeah, that's what I was thinking, or I never thought of that, whatever. So 2 is better than 1, and 3 would have been better than 2. Okay, we talked about Grand Chute and AFD, we talked about that. And so now, here we are in 1986, April 1st, the fire department is done. They said we're not going to pursue it. What happens on June 2nd, 1986? Theda Star starts, so it's like, whoa, it's something new now. Anyway, so that's what I have.